Hey all. So we are talking about Dani Moonstar today. She is, of course, the first mutant to be added to the contest in over a year, which means that a lot of people have already fashioned her some fairly large shoes. I think she does a pretty good job of filling them, so let's go ahead and get into it. First off, there's her prestige. People have been complaining about feeling like they need to rank Namor to have the top prestige mutant for a long time now. He's not in the top 5 anymore, and while a Max Sigma Namor is very good, it's not what you want to feel locked into, right? Well, Danny's prestige is tied with Quicksilver's. So here's another option. Immediately right up at the top, outpacing Doom and Zemo. So really competitive prestige. We move into the strengths. Big Juicy Specials is accurate. If you play her correctly, her specials do an incredible amount of damage. Her basics are actually a bit more disappointing, if that's your thing. But, she's a mutant. Mutants are built around big specials, and Dani is no exception. She has an interesting way to deal with the skill class's love of reducing your block proficiency, in that when she has any of these three, uh, not just debuffs, I started to say that, but effects on her, she gains more of her primary currency, and then she can just cause miss so she doesn't have to block at all. So she doesn't really play fully like Ghost or Viv, but if you're fighting like a hard knock life node or something that's regularly putting disorients, something similar on you, then she starts to get into that territory and you can get a lot more openings easily. And then dead means dead. So this is good for the Heimdall style effects, but also probably the most notable target. She has a way of just completely turning off Nick Fury's second life, which, for all of us who have fought against him in battlegrounds, probably every other match for the last year and a half, pretty nice. Moving on to weaknesses, like I said, her basics are pretty disappointing, so if there's something getting in the way of you throwing her specials, she's not gonna feel good. She just isn't. Similarly, prowess removal is going to be a big problem because her specials are so large because of very powerful prowess effects, and then miscounters do get around her pretty decently. This is going to come up in the Nick Fury fight, but there are ways to ameliorate it, which we can talk about a little bit more later. The other weakness that I'm going to shout out now is that she really does not like getting hit. Because, unlike a lot of other mutants, she has a mechanic that feeds off of her combo count, and that means being reset to 0 at a bad time can significantly slow you down. So we'll talk about that more as we go, but just something to keep in mind. So, let's start with her primary currency, her illusion charges. Whenever either champion's combo meter passes a multiple of 10, gain a non-stacking indefinite illusion. This is lost when knocked down. So obviously when she's a defender, this is not the most important thing in the world, because yeah, you're going to get to 10. There are easy ways around this. I'm not too worried about her as a missed defender. On offense, you really want to get as many of these as possible, so that's where I was talking about. She really does not like to get hit. It's kind of like fighting Void. If you are at 9 and you get hit and your combo resets to 0, you can be in a world of hurt trying to get back up there and manage the overall fight's tempo from where it was. So, obviously, we never intend to get hurt, but if you can manage with Dani, or sorry, we never intend to get hit, both. If you can manage with Dani to get hit when you're at like 11 or 12 instead of 9, definitely feels that much better. And of course, you do not want to get knocked down with her. As we talked about earlier, whenever she's inflicted with Disorient, Fragility, or Intimidate, she gains an illusion charge for free, and then this will keep happening every 10 seconds. And so the illusion charge itself allows you to inflict a falter when you block a basic attack. This is why I'm not worried about it on defense, because if you just don't hit into her block while she has this resource, it doesn't matter at all. The falter lasts 2.5 seconds, and is not affected by ability accuracy reduction, and is paused during her special attacks, which is very important for reasons we'll get to later. The nuance there between 150 and 100 isn't going to come up much because it's not affected by ability accuracy reduction, but I'm sure there will be places where it matters. Moving on to her neural arrows. Whenever the opponent misses, which is pretty much always going to be because of those personal falters, you gain an indefinite neural arrow. And then as a defender, she can also gain these while hitting your block while she has an illusion. You kind of have to pay attention to that, but still, as long as you're not getting hit, not the end of the world for her to have these. And that is because the way these neural arrows get used is that the last hit of Dani's special attacks inflicts a neuroshock debuff, dealing a decent amount of energy damage over 8 seconds, and then you remove all the neural arrows. These neuroshocks are not spelled out here. They will have a glossary entry in-game, in case anybody's wondering why there isn't more here. They deal energy damage, like they say. They also prevent miss. They are kind of like cold snaps, in that cold snaps deal energy damage and prevent evade. Neuroshocks prevent miss. So that is the goal there. And then for Dani and Dani alone, skill champions can't heal while neuroshocked. I spell that out because I just know that we are going to get into a space where people think that neuroshocks, as part of their base abilities, stop healing for skill champions, the same way that a lot of people still seem to think that cowardice removes all prowess effects instead of just Kitty Pryde's prowess effects. And I'm trying to get ahead of it, but I know that's going to happen anyway. So moving on to the prowess effects. Dani's prowesses by default have 15% potency and last forever. If her prowess effects don't trigger or are removed by the opponent, then she gains a neural arrow. So you're going to have to keep all of that in mind. This does mean that she builds her neural arrows faster against somebody like Nimrod. So you really don't want to get hit with specials if you're using Nimrod against her or somebody similar with prowess removal. It's not the end of the world, but you just really do not want to get hit. On offense, this is helpful if you're using her against somebody who has buff control, something along those lines. You're probably going to want to avoid these fights when you can, where this line of text comes up, but it is an extra little bit of insurance because the neural arrows feed her prowess, as we'll get to in a second. You gain a prowess buff when faltering the opponent. So when the actual falter effects go on the opponent, this doesn't require them to miss. So the falter goes on them, and then when they miss, you get a neural arrow, and then when you hit them while the falter is active, you get a prowess. So the way this normally works is you get an illusion charge, you activate it by them hitting into your block, you immediately get one prowess buff, and immediately get one neural arrow because they miss. You usually let them continue to hit into you a couple more times to get more neural arrows, and then you try and land a full combo before the falter goes away to stack more prowess buffs. This can also happen as a defender when you are getting hit while she has an illusion charge, but, then you're getting hit by the defender, so you probably have other issues. Activating a special attack while you have active neural arrows removes all of these personal prowess buffs and replaces them with prowess passives. And then you lose all prowess effects at the end of the special attack. All personal prowess passives gained during special attacks gain 80% potency for each neural arrow. So what that means is that these start at 15% potency, right? 80% of that is 12. So that means if you have 5 neural arrows, then these 15% prowesses become 27% prowesses, so significantly stronger. And that is the whole goal of the neural arrows. But the other thing to keep in mind is that Dani's falter is paused during her special attacks, and so you can consume 5 prowess buffs, turn them into these better prowess passives, and then continue to gain buffs during the special because that counts as you striking the opponent while they are faltered. So you're really going to want to try and line those things up. The ideal time to throw Dani's specials is when you have 5 neural arrows, 5 prowess buffs, and when the opponent is faltered, so you can get all 5 passives at maximum potency and keep building even more buffs. So the special one, very first hit, gives you a slow passive for 20 seconds. This does need to hit. So if you are fighting an evader that can evade the first hit, you're going to want to do whatever you can to try and make sure it lands. But after that first hit, you're good for 20 seconds. It is a passive. It cannot be shrugged by skill champions. This is extremely helpful for your Molemans, your Korgs, your Kingpins, etc. Just before the final hit, Dani will go unblockable. This does mean that the special one can be thrown into block, but I would not recommend it because only the final hit is going to go unblockable. You do want to watch out for this on defense if you're trying to block her special one, because she probably has some neural arrows from hitting into your block. She could go unblockable here. It's only the one hit, but yeah, keep an eye on it. The unblockable passive lasts an additional second for each neural arrow, so this does mean if you're using like the Storm Relic, you can hit a bit harder after it, but you're no longer in your specials. It's not going to be a lot of damage. This is more, in my opinion, just you want an opening after the special one to capitalize on the energy vulnerability you just landed and or the slow. This makes it that much easier to get that opening. And then, as we just talked about, final hit inflicts a non-stacking, pretty juicy energy vulnerability passive for 30 seconds. So Dani's base hits are physical. This doesn't help them out, but it will make the neuroshocks that her specials apply significantly stronger, and then this also matters quite a bit for the special 2. So the special 2 has an impact passive, which is just block penetration. This allows Dani to hit harder through block. This almost doesn't matter on offense. It's mostly a small defensive trick. Her special 2 Her special 2 dex is tricky. It reminds me quite a bit of Hitmonkey, but it is possible to full dex it if you spend some time on it. If you think you're going to be running into Dani somewhere where her special 2 is a factor, I would highly recommend you work on it, because otherwise this can sting a bit through block. The important part of the special 2, most of the time though, is this second bullet, which is that if you have your max neural arrows, if you have 5, then you inflict a 70% overload passive for 25 seconds. Now, overload is basically just trauma, but for energy, which means that you get 70% of the damage you've recently done as a burst of energy, and recently meaning like in the last hit. The thing is that this energy damage is then magnified by the energy vulnerability passive, and so it ends up working out to more of a 100% effect if you have both active, and it's close to just doubling your damage. I don't think it works out exactly 1-to-1, but you can basically read this as if you throw the special 1 to get the energy vulnerability, and then the special 2 to get the overload, basically all of the damage from that special 2 is going to be doubled as red numbers, and that's going to feel really nice. So moving on to the special 3, this attack costs less power for each neural arrow. Obviously neural arrows are going to be at a maximum of 5 when you throw this, so that is up to a maximum of 30% less power. You will almost be at a special 1. As people have called out, yes, this does mean that if you are using power backs, you can throw the special 3 and be over a bar of power. Cool, you're into your rotation. Just make sure you have enough time to keep building your resources. You are going to gain 6 prowess buffs right away, so you don't necessarily need to worry about building as many of those. But the limit for prowess buffs is increased to 10 until the end of the next special attack. So what you do with this is up to you. You're probably going to want to build your neural arrows back up. You could throw the special 1 to get the energy vulnerability. That's definitely one way to go. I think what you're hoping for if you do this is that you still have the energy vulnerability from your last special one, although it's probably starting to get a bit tight at that point. Because what you probably want to do here, ideally, is take advantage of the fact that you can have more 23% prowess passives next time you activate a special attack. You can have 10 instead of 5. And you probably want to gun for the special 2 because that's your big damage payout. Activate it with the 5 neural arrows that you've built up and just do an absolute ton of damage. Even without the energy vulnerability, the special itself hitting almost twice as hard and having the overload active is going to feel really solid. So that's what I'd probably do with that most of the time, but if you are able to keep the energy vulnerability up for that much longer, then cool, that'll work out great. And then her signature ability, if a Neuroshock or Stun debuff is removed for any reason other than expiry, then you inflict a Neuroshock passive. So this is not going to inflict a stun passive, right? It's just a Neuroshock passive. Most of the time, this is going to come up due to purification. That's the most common reason that a stun or a Neuroshock would get removed by the opponent. And so this is the core ability that allows her to counter Nick Fury, because when Nick goes into his second life, he purifies all effects on himself. And so if you have at least one Neuroshock debuff on him, he will purify that. It will turn into a Neuroshock passive. And then Neuroshock passives for Dani stop skill opponents from healing, so he won't gain any of the health he's supposed to going into his second life, and he will take a tick of this energy damage and just fall over. So very, very nice for that. But this can also come up when these debuffs are removed for other reasons, such as shifting immunities. So if you are fighting somebody like Emma Frost, per se, or even, I suppose, Hercules, and you stun them, and that stun is still active when they go stun immune. So let's say when Emma gets pushed into diamond form. Well then, that stun is going to be removed due to immunity, but then you are going to inflict a Neuroshock passive to punish it. So, interesting ways that can come up if you've got your eye out for it. And then the second part of the signature ability, when the opponent's health is at or below 10%, you get this indefinite marked passive, which just turns off a whole bunch of annoying abilities like regen, indestructible, immortality. So Dani's really good for handling people like Hela, Heimdall, like we talked about. This has some interesting implications for quest nodes, because a lot of quest nodes are not true indestructible effects. So only some of them actually have regen. A lot of them are actually just like health cannot go below this value until you do X. And so you're going to want to watch out for, as much as you can, the difference between those in descriptions. Two that got asked of me on stream that I'll try to address now are Do Not Go Gentle and Life Cycle. So Do Not Go Gentle, I'm pretty sure, is just a cannot be knocked out, not an indestructible. So I don't believe Dani's going to turn that off. You are going to need to intercept to get rid of those charges and then knock your opponent out. So I wouldn't use her there, but for Life Cycle, I think that Dani still isn't going to get around the cannot get knocked out part, but if you're fighting a skill champion, you are going to be able to turn off the regen side of things with your Neuroshocks, and so it should be that much easier to close things out. So there are trade-offs. This marked passive is going to be one of those abilities that I think it's just going to take time for the community to figure out the places where they like it the most. But it's definitely nice. Anything that can kill Hercules without having to worry about buff control or a special 3 is already that much better in my book. Moving on to Synergies, she has a couple interesting unique ones. With Phoenix, Professor X, Emma Frost, and Psylocke, well-timed blocks give you an energy resistance passive. Nice little bit of sustain for all of them. With Mysterio, Wiccan, Viv, and Spidey Supreme, 3 of whom are famously squishy, Dexing is going to grant you a physical resistance passive, so nice little safeguard there. With Hawkeye and Kate Bishop, projectile hits gain an additional 25% critical damage rating. This is fun for Dani's side of it because it makes her specials bigger and can get you more out of those overload passives. This is really good for Clint and Kate because both of them apply critical damaging effects on their specials. Hawkeye's bleeds, poisons, or ruptures. Man has a lot of synergies. And Kate's cold snaps will get a significant damage boost from this. And then you have Flight of the Valkyries with Valkyrie, Angela, and Hela, where all of these champions gain a 50% pierce buff while the opponent is at or below 20% health. So if you are fighting somebody like Penny or Iron Man Infinity War and you're having trouble closing out the fight, this is going to give you 50% block penetration. And probably going to make you much better at just getting over that final line, even if you have to hit into block. It's obviously quite good for Valkyrie, but for any of the three of them, can be good for closing out fights. There's also already a unique incoming synergy for her from Moondragon. Some people speculated on this, called it correctly, and Dani is going to deal a burst of energy damage whenever the opponent misses. So kind of like Kitty Pryde's punishment, but I don't think this one is quite as strong. It is specifically base attack. And that's Dani. Honestly, relatively simple overall. There's a lot of mental real estate that you're going to have to put into understanding the illusion neural arrow prowess buff ecosystem. But once you have that down, which is what you're focusing on during her basic attacks, then the specials kind of take care of themselves. You throw special 1, you throw special 2, the opponent's probably dead. If they're still alive, you can do that again. And so if you spend a little bit of time getting that ecosystem down, I think Dani's going to produce really solid results on your account. She's very fun to play. She has really great animations. And for those of us who care, she has really solid prestige. I think she is an excellent addition to the contest, and I look forward to seeing what people manage to do with her. So I will be coming back with the Lady Deathstrike Spotlight tomorrow, but until then, thank you so much for watching, and take care.